Today's kind of interesting because we're going to talk about a topic of compassion. What is compassion and how do we apply it? And a lot of times we think of compassion as something we give to strangers or something we give to people who are very close to us. Strangers or people who are incredibly close to us, but having compassion on people who are in that middle area, yeah, we kind of know them, we've seen what they're doing, and we think, what in the world? Having compassion on people. A lot of times we struggle with compassion. We are going to be in Mark chapter 1, but we struggle with compassion because we see people doing things and we think, if you had any sense at all, you wouldn't do that. Didn't your mother raise you better? Unless we're the mother or the father. And then we look at people's actions in the present and we think, don't you know any better? Didn't your mom teach you to close the door? Didn't she tell you? We blame other people for things that they do. And I'll tell you from the very beginning that I believe that people are responsible for their actions. I don't excuse someone's actions because of something else. But a lot of times what we don't see in people's lives is the history of events that have been enacted upon them that have led them to be the type of person that makes these choices. There are a few exceptions, but a lot of times a person is a result, the person today is a result of how they have been enacted upon and the choices they have made up to this point. It's a combination of those things. Sometimes we see really dumb behavior out of people and we think, what in the world? And what researchers are finding is a lot of times that dumb behavior, what we call dumb behavior, that the source of that type of thinking can be traced back to events in people's lives. And again, I don't blame every choice a person's make on some past event that's happened to them. But those events do shape the way people think. And this morning we're going to talk about having compassion on people when they're being irresponsible or dangerous. One of those sources, as I said, is historically in people's lives. They've had events that have happened. And sometimes we call those events that are negative in someone's life a traumatic event. And the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs says that in the United States, 60% of men have experienced a traumatic event, and 50% of women have experienced at least one traumatic event. And what we know is that one traumatic event can shape someone's way of thinking, the way they view other people and view the world. So what a traumatic event is, according to the U.S. Department, it's a shocking or dangerous event that you see or that happens to you. During this type of event, you think your life is in danger or other people's lives are in danger. Something dangerous has just happened that you've either witnessed or has happened to you. That's a traumatic event. You're afraid for your life or the life of someone else. Carissa and I, along with many of you, were involved in social service, foster care, public health, dealing with people who are living out on the fringes of life. And you see that there are a lot of experiences even one individual can have that we would call traumatic events. So if one traumatic event can shape the way somebody thinks and experiences life and makes choices, what would a number of traumatic events do to this person's way of thinking? I have something that we're going to talk about this morning. This is the introduction. We're going to get to Jesus here in a minute. But a way that researchers have come to understand these traumatic events are called adverse childhood experiences. And since we have to make acronyms for everything, we call those ACEs. Adverse childhood experiences. So an adverse experience is a traumatic event that a person experiences in childhood, 18 years or younger. And we're all good. Okay. I have a quiz. I've only had to black out one line on this quiz because of our audience. But you can keep score on your hands if you want. There are 10 questions that just begin to glimpse at, are you a person that has experienced a traumatic event or multiple? So you don't have to show everybody your hands, you can keep your fingers. But if the answer to these questions, each one, is yes, there's 1 point. If it's no, don't give yourself a point, okay? All right, so we're going to walk through these. I'm going to ask you quickly to answer these just for yourself. The types, I skipped a part, sorry. I'll come back to, no, let's just do this now. I've already introed the quiz. Let's do the quiz. Okay, before your 18th birthday, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid you might be physically hurt? Okay, so if you can say, yeah, I remember, even if it's once, obviously it's stuck in your head. If that happened to you, then you'll give yourself a point. You can, if you want to stick your hands underneath your armpits so nobody sees your score, that's fine. First question. Second one, before your 18th birthday, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Okay, give yourself a 0 or a 1. Before your 18th birthday, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever, touch or fondle you? Okay, let's be adults. I know there are teenagers here. We'll touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way. Or attempt or actually black that out with you. And of course means interacting for you adults. Like, oh my goodness, can't believe Ben's talking about this in church. Okay, so 1 is a yes, 0 is a no. Before your 18th birthday, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special? Or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Okay? Almost done. Before your 18th birthday, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you? Or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you, or to take care of the or to take you to the doctor if you needed it? Before your 18th birthday, was a biological parent ever lost to you through divorce, abandonment, or another reason? Before your 18th birthday, was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her, or sometimes often or very often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or knife? Before your 18th birthday, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic who used street drugs? So alcoholic or used street drugs. Okay, and before your 18th birthday, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Before your 18th birthday, did a household member go to prison? These are 10 questions that highlight some traumatic events. This isn't the sum total of it, but right now, if your hands are under your armpits, you have a score. Keep in mind that one yes can shape the way you see the world. If you have more than one yes, the way you see the world, it's not a definite guaranteed, oh man, you're messed up, you're never going to be anything in life. These type of events can affect the way people see the world. And maybe you scored a 1 or a 0, and like, I'm pretty good. You don't know what anybody else in here scored. You don't know what other people around you have scored. what we see, oh, that's so tiny. This initial survey was taken over like 17,000 people. Okay? It was a huge number. 27% of people who experienced a traumatic event had substance abuse problems. 23% said they were dealt with divorce. 17% had mental illness. 13% said it was because of their parents. So out of all of these people, maybe these, well, that's not very common things. We can see that they're actually quite common. 28% of people said they've experienced physical abuse. Now, these aren't isolated. Some of them only experienced one. Some people experience multiple things. But what happens is, when I've experienced a traumatic event, that shapes the way I see the world. It shapes the way I respond to events. And we see that for people who have had, let's say you've experienced 2 traumatic events out of the test group that they had, 10% of those people were alcoholics. If they had 4 traumatic events, 16% had become alcoholics. If you've experienced traumatic events, chronic depression could be a problem. And let's look at the last one. For women, almost 70% of women who had experienced traumatic events dealt with depression. Well, men don't deal with those things. Men are tough, right? We can handle it. 35% of men who had experienced traumatic events deal with depression. 4 or more events, almost a 20% chance that they will attempt suicide. So where am I going with this? We look at people and the choices that they make in the present, and we say, why in the world do you drink so much? What is wrong with you? We look at somebody and say, well, why are you sad all the time? Why don't you just buck up? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's not the way things are. And what we learned is, well, that might not be the way things were for you, but when you have somebody who has dealt with traumatic events, 1 or more traumatic events that have been a part of somebody's life, we begin to see that the way they see the world and see other people is different. I can say, well, just trust your wife. Well, let's take it back to the 18-year-old. Well, just trust your mom. Your mom loves you, right? I say that to somebody, and let's say their mother abused them. What is love to a child who had an abusive mother? Well, your mother loves you. What's that mean? Well, I know how my mom treated me. If that's love, then I believe the preacher when he says, my mom loves me. Beating someone is good. You see the jump there? It's not a jump. When we say things to people and we interact with people, a lot of times what we see is the present, and we say, I can't believe you'd do something like that. What's wrong with you? What would happen if we knew someone's history and we knew the events that they had been through in life that led to them being a person who made these types of choices? How do we deal with people like that? Well, when it's your own child who's being dumb, mothers say, he's a good boy, he's just made some bad choices. Preface it. 9 times, I'm just making this stat up, 9 times out of 10, I made that up. You hear a mom talk about a son who's, they call that a bad choice. He's a good boy, they always preface it with, I love my son, I care about him, but. And we do that with people when we know their history. In Mark chapter 1, we're going to take a look at how Jesus dealt with someone, and I learned some really interesting things this week as I was studying for this. If you have your Bible and want to open to Mark chapter 1, I'm just going to read 5 verses. 3 verses, excuse me. We're going to read Mark chapter 1, and we're going to start with verse 40. We're going to start with verse 40 and through 42. Mark chapter 1. A man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you're willing, you can make me clean." Jesus was indignant. That's what my Bible says. Your Bible might say Jesus was full of compassion. Jesus was indignant. He reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Oh, what happened here? This guy had a skin disease. Said, "Jesus healed me." Jesus healed him. End of story. Well, not really. This man had leprosy and came to Jesus. Violation of the law, lepers are not allowed to approach people. Like, you have to stay far away, wear torn up clothes, keep your hair all nasty. You have to look like somebody who's on the out and out. Somebody who lives in the gutter. Somebody who sleeps on the sidewalk in front of the building. You have to look like that if you're dealing with this problem. And then to have the nerve to approach the rabbi. So the most unclean of society willfully approached the most clean of society, the rabbi. The nerve of somebody to do that. Don't you know? Jesus didn't say, "Don't you know who I am?" Kind of. He said, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." So this man had leprosy, skin disease. That's a general term they use. Could have been a number of things. But they're thought of as contagious. And he approached Jesus. And verse 41, I'm not sure how yours reads, but it says, Jesus was indignant. Or he was full of compassion. In my mind, those are two very different things. Indignant is like, "How dare you?" And full of compassion is, "Oh, you poor thing." Like, how can our translators take this word and translate it two different ways? I don't really know exactly how to pronounce this word. My friend Doug and I were talking about this week when we were working on flooring. And he said, "Oh, you've got to talk about splachnochenu," or something. I don't remember the splachnu, nothing. I don't know. Kind of sounds German, but it's Greek, so I know it's not German. This word that Jesus said here, that is said here about Jesus, Jesus was, whatever the word is. It's a word that we get the root word of that. We use the word spleen. It's this organ in your bowels, in your stomach. Jesus was wrenched in his stomach. He felt this man. When this man approached him, Jesus' intestines turned. That's what he's saying. Why did they turn? Well, now we go to this. Was he indignant or was he compassionate? And the answer is yes. This man approached Jesus, this really, really sick man who is all kinds of sick and is not even supposed to be here. You're out of your territory. Go back to where you belong. This is where the clean people are. Thank you very much. When he approached Jesus, Jesus' spleen turned. That's what the word means. It was an emotion he felt in his bowels. Like, oh. So is it indignant or is it compassion? The answer is yes. Well, why would Jesus be indignant with this poor sick man? This question was asked this morning. Why would Jesus have told someone, "Don't tell anyone who I am"? And I think Brandy was the first to point out was Jesus wanted to be able to go to other people individually and speak to them. But if everybody knows about it, then now there are big crowds and he can't do this. Yes, Jesus had a ministry inside the towns, and he knew that as soon as he dealt with this man, it was going to change his life. This was going to be incredibly inconvenient and make his life much more difficult. Dealing with this man was going to make Jesus' life much more difficult. Oh, you're kidding me. That's not a, oh, get away from me. It's a, oh, you're kidding me. Here we go. And also compassion. But I know what you've been through, because Jesus had that like supernatural, I can see the past and the future thing going on. But I know you. Oh, this is really going to make my life difficult, but I know you. And I see the pain you're in. So what did Jesus do? First, what did he do? He touched him. Jesus touched a dirty man. I think he should have cleaned him first and then touched him. Because the second the rabbi touched the leper, the rabbi became ceremonially unclean. Which means, well, we don't want your kind around here either. Oh, well, if that's what you're going to do, then you need to stay away too. That's what it means to the temple. As soon as Jesus touched the leper, he was not allowed in the temple. Period. Jesus touched the illness and then healed him. And Mark writes things in order on purpose. When Mark wrote this, he intentionally said that Jesus touched the leper, then healed him. I like for people to be healed while they are over there. And then I'll say, all right, now you can come over here. But when people run up on me and they're a hot mess and they've got all kinds of craziness going in their life, and their life has the potential to make mine messy and complicated, I'm like, please, I don't know you. You dirty beggar, I can't believe you have... When I don't know someone, I want them over there, get fixed first, then we'll talk. When I have compassion on somebody, I can say, this is going to be a mess, life's going to get dirty, but I see the hurt and the anguish that you're going through. I know what it's like to feel all alone. Let me help you. It's going to be miserable. Yes, my life's going to get more difficult. But I see that there has been a history of events that have led you to the point where you are so desperate, you are going to violate the law in order to get help. Let me help you. It's easier to have compassion on people when we understand they have been through things in their past that we might not even see that has caused them to be the person they are. Just because you go through junk, I'm going to categorize all traumatic events as junk. Just because you've been through junk does not mean you're going to become a drug addict. But it does mean if you've been through junk and you choose to find comfort in something that numbs your pain for a little while, I can see how that would be a little bit of a relief. Well, if they just cared about themselves more, then they'd just stop. Why'd they start in the first place? Don't you know all junkies are just people who run around and they're like adrenaline addicts and they just want to get that next high? Except for a friend of mine whose wife was given pain medicine after her birth because she was dealing with some complications, and her body loved that pain medicine. So much so that when the doctor said, okay, you don't need it anymore, her body was still screaming for it. So she found other ways to get that feeling. And now she has lost her children and her marriage. Well, drug addicts, they're just irresponsible, neglectful people. Sometimes they are. Sometimes there's a history of events that have led people to be who they are. And when I know that, then I can say, oh, man. Compassion. When I can glimpse people the way Jesus sees them, then I can begin to look at them and say, oh no, let me help. When I begin to see people the way Jesus sees them, I can serve them out of love. It's not just the learning about who they are that matters. Jesus knew the person's history. He knew his illness. And then he touched him. It's the follow-up. That's serving because he loved him. When we understand people's story, I might not even know. But now that I have been educated on adverse childhood experiences, when we're dealing with kids or even adults who are like, what in the world are you thinking? Don't you have a lick of sense? Now I know that I don't know. There could be a number of things that have led him here. What can I do at this point in time to let them know you shouldn't do that, but I love you? Compassion for someone is not saying what you're doing is okay. It's saying, in spite of what you're doing, I still care about you enough to intervene. That's compassion. God has called us to be compassionate people. That's what Jesus was. When I know what you want, God, but I'm not going to do it, Christ still died for me. God knew who I was before I chose to serve him. And he said, what you're doing is really stupid, but I'm still going to intervene. We all have our own stories and our own histories of who we were before we chose to live for Christ. And while we were still sinners, Christ had compassion on us and died for us. What we want to do is learn and apply that same love that Christ had for us. Compassion is not excusing someone's choices. It's saying, in spite of what you are doing, I still love you, and I'm going to work for your good. So the question is, how can we be compassionate? This is kind of heavy. I have one more heavy example, then we're going to close with something happy. Okay? Happy is coming. If you remember last May, so how does this apply to Ben and Carissa? Last June, I think it was, 1st of June, we talked about one of the teachers who has had a great impact on Carissa's life, and I've enjoyed him also, but huge impact. Fantastic philosopher, brilliant man, Ravi Zacharias. Brilliant in his way, in his ability to explain who God is and why it only makes sense to serve God. Had a huge impact on Carissa's life. But this week, he died in May. This week, Ravi Zacharias Ministries, the organization that he founded, released an investigative report into his personal activities for the past 8 years. And what they uncovered was he had a number of phones connected to hundreds of women. I'll stop there because you could probably fill in the blanks. Now my compassion just went out the door. What in the world? Like that's that you hurt so bad because you have got to be kidding me. So the first thing I thought was I was going to tell each and every one of you here today, do not depend on me to be God for you or to be your source of Christ-likeness. Don't depend on me. I can tell you that she's the only person that I have ever been with. And yesterday we were like, you know what? It's great to be mediocre. You don't get all the attention and the temptation. But you still get the temptation, don't you? But this man that we had respected and admired and knew so much about God and had had such an impact, didn't really believe it. Because if you believed it, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing, right? He was a phony, a fake. And you want me to be compassionate about a phony? Not going to happen. That's my you God. Ugh. How do I have compassion on somebody? I don't know. pretty clear. The Bible says if you are an elder or a leader in the family of God, God holds you to a higher standard. And I can tell you that I do not want to be Robbie on Judgment Day. No, thank you. But how do I get myself to the point where I say, in spite of all that you've done to discredit God's church, like he's done. I mean, he's dead. I can't do anything for him. How do I handle that? So I'm still working on that one. I'm mad at him. What a jerk. That's how I am right now. It'll take me a few months. But I still know that he has a soul. And hopefully, in some way, God is able to demonstrate mercy. I don't know how, because he's ruined a lot of lives. How do I have compassion when the pain is personal? That will require prayer. How do I carry a cross and be whipped and hung for the people who whipped and hung me? I don't have a good answer for that one yet either. Except becoming more like Christ today so that I can have compassion on the people that God brings into my life tomorrow. So compassion is real, and sometimes it's real work. So I don't say this as a pastor who has it all figured out. If you'd just be like me, then everybody would be better. I'm mad at Robbie. He's dead. I'm still mad at him. But I want to get to the point where I can say, but you have a soul, and God help you some way. That's not the ending that I had planned, but I still have a happy ending. So what can we do with this? What we can do is ask God to help us see people the way he sees them and to care for people the way he cares for them, so that when he brings them to us, we can touch their lives. Help me to see them the way you see them so that I can bring healing into their lives. That's what I do with it. All right. This is the official ending of the sermon.